ain't got no boundaries to hold me back. Boundaries is what I lack. Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Conflation Station. Hop on board the next train out, and let's take a ride to a place where anything's possible.
Hello and welcome to the Conflation Station. My name is Hugo Yorway and I'll be your tour guide for today's podcast, including political commentary, conspiracy theories, and some cool music from the Electric Love Orchestra. At the Conflation Station, our team of creative writers and novice journalists combine elements of irony, satire, and pure absurdity to create insightful political commentary and homespun conflated conspiracy theories taken from today's news headlines. In the first segment of our show, known as the 14th Circuit, or what I like to call the Court of Public Opinion, renowned raconteur the Reverend Rusty Stubblefield shares his unfiltered and unhinged views about America's constitutional, or shall I say unconstitutional, crisis. His topic this week is federalizing the National Guard. Rusty, the microphone is all yours.
Well, thank you, Hugo. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I feel much safer now knowing that the military is going to be patrolling the streets of our major cities. It's nice to see them G.I. Joes with these boots on the ground fighting off all them carjackers, drug dealers, murderers, and rapists. Heck, if we's going to have a strong military presence in our streets, I think our cops could also benefit from some aerial support from above, too. What do you think? Like, why don't we get some of them B-2 stealth bombers up there in the skies around Reagan National Airport in D.C. and that O'Hare Airport in Chicago? These can be doing some criminal surveillance and jamming up the freaking airspace. That sure as hell will scare away those punks from shoplifting at my local Walmart and 7-Eleven. And while that President Trump feller is at it, I'd like to ask him if he could deploy some Navy SEALs to patrol the swimming pool in my backyard. I'm getting tired of being blindsided by my neighbor's kids with these super soakers. Now, here's an idea. How's about having some of them Apache helicopters patrolling the interstate highways, pulling people over and giving them speeding tickets? Ain't likely that my friend Billy's Hemi can outrun an Apache helicopter. Heck, if there ain't enough Apaches to go around, maybe we could call in some of them Tomahawks to tag team with them. The more I toy with this idea of using the military to police our cities, the more I likes it. Let's make America safe again. Now that's one heck of a slogan. Maybe we can even get red baseball caps with the letters M-A-S-A spelled out on them. Bet those Trumpers will love calling it the Massa Movement. Sounds sort of like the way those black folks talked to they's masters when slavery was still in full swing. You know how when you's coming to a city, there's usually a big-ass sign that says, "Welcome to Chicago," or something like that, depending on the city? Well, at that same spot, the military could set up a checkpoint to inspect every car going in and coming out, like they's custom agents do at the border. And right alongside the road, the Army can park some big-ass nukes on flatbeds just to show them that in Chicago, the United States government means business. I almost forgot. While we's at it, let's show them domestic terrorists, you know, those people of color, that the military ain't so bad after all. How's about we hold a military parade once a week down Main Street? You know, the Marine Corps band playing John Philip Sousa marches while the drill team sets to spinning these bayonets and the rest of these troops is goose-stepping like they do in those military parades held in China. It would be one heck of an extravaganza. But for some strange reason, I don't believe Trump is doing all this military shit for the purpose of reducing crime. He's a sneaky, dishonest man, and I think he's got an ulterior motive. Here's what I think he's doing. I think he's pre-positioning military assets in them there big cities now so that when the time comes at the end of his second term in office, and he can't serve no more than 2 because of his term limits, He got everything in place for a military coup d'etat. He's got things all figured out. There ain't going to be no inauguration day in January 2028. There's going to be a military takeover so that Trump feller can stay in power. That is, till the empire strikes back. And by that I mean you and me. And now, as I say at the end of each of my weekly sermons, if you and me put our pretty little heads together, we may still be able to figure out how to get this here US of A back on track. Thank y'all for listening.
Rusty Stubblefield is an unemployed certified auto mechanic and deacon at the Church of Our Lady of Original Sin. And now it's time to take our weekly musical journey with the inimitable Electric Love Orchestra featuring Rusty Stubblefield on vocals in an original piece written by world-renowned composer E. Dudex entitled, I Hate to Wait. Stay tuned and we'll be right back with this week's Conflated Conspiracy Theories.
I hate to wait. So please, don't make me wait. Ain't got no time to waste. So please, don't make me wait. Give me a time and place. But please, don't make me wait.
Thank you, Rusty, E. Dudex, and the Electric Love Orchestra for creating that masterpiece, available online at Bearberry Path Music. In our next segment of the podcast, we'll be sharing various homegrown conspiracy theories that have been developed by our staff of creative writers and novice journalists who believe first and foremost that, at the Conflation Station, anything is possible. We invite you, our listeners, to share your own homegrown conspiracy theories by sending an email to bearberrypathmusic, one word, @gmail.com. That's bearberrypathmusic, one word, @gmail.com. And place the words conspiracy theory in the subject line. We would love to hear from you, our listeners. Today, we will be turning our attention to stories about RFK Jr. and Melania Trump. Our lead story this week focuses on Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s testimony before the Senate Finance Committee. Last week, sparks flew at a meeting of the Senate Finance Committee when senators lashed out at RFK Jr. for his glaring incompetence, complete lack of knowledge of the United States healthcare system, and for his use of numerous debunked conspiracy theories instead of using proven medical research and science to support his policy decisions, specifically his views on vaccinations. Kennedy is a well-known anti-vaxxer. At the hearing, RFK Jr. drew rebuke from Republican and Democrat senators alike, and several senators called for Kennedy's immediate resignation from his position. When asked about Kennedy's display of both ignorance and arrogance, Republican Senator and Chair of the Finance Committee Ron Wyden said, quote, Senators Warren, Sanders, and Mark Warner tore RFK Jr. a new asshole, yet one more asshole to complement the rest of President Trump's cabinet, end quote. Those who watched Kennedy's 3 hours of painstaking testimony agreed that Kennedy was completely out of control for more than 100% of the time. Throughout the hearing, Kennedy was often caught on camera repeatedly sputtering and muttering, liar, liar, pants on fire, under his breath when challenged by senators about his bizarre policy decisions. An incoherent Kennedy put on full public display that he knew absolutely nothing about medicine, public health, or the Department of Health and Human Services in general. When Senator Bernie Sanders asked RFK Jr. to share his key insights, Kennedy, with the clear-eyed conviction of a man in a drunken stupor, identified Tylenol as the leading cause of autism, masturbating and crossing your eyes as the leading cause of blindness, and cold weather as the cause of respiratory illnesses such as the common cold and influenza. Kennedy said, quote, Getting an annual flu shot is a hoax contrived by the pharmaceutical industry. You've got to starve a cold and feed a fever. That's how it works. Instead of getting a flu shot, just try some chicken soup, and if you have a fever, take an ice-cold bath." End quote. Kennedy continued his tirade saying, quote, "Drinking coffee stunts your growth, eating carrots improves your eyesight, and if you don't want arthritis, don't crack your damn knuckles." End quote. Kennedy offered some strong guidance for children. Quote, "For parents who have adolescents, do not feed them anything with chocolate in it. It causes acne. And for those parents of children with ADHD, limit their sugar intake." End quote. And lastly, in an effort to reduce the infant mortality rate, Kennedy recommended to all parents that if they have both an infant child and a cat in their home, they should keep them separated, particularly at night, because cats have been known to kill sleeping babies by stealing their breath. Kennedy family members were left in total shock after watching their relative RFK Jr.'s testimony on television. Caroline Kennedy said, quote, "My cousin Bobby is batshit crazy and lives in a fantasy land where science fiction dominates his thinking. His failure to address his own mental illness is a metaphor for the health crisis in America." End quote. At the conclusion of the hearing, Kennedy was bound in a straitjacket and sent to the hospital for a rabies shot and an emergency lobotomy. In a related story, signaling a more bellicose posture towards America's adversaries, last week President Trump changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. In a flurry of executive orders to come next week, President Trump will also be changing the names of several other cabinet-level departments. The list is as follows. The Department of Labor will be changed to the Ministry of Oppression. The Department of Justice to the Ministry of Political Retribution and Pardons. The Department of Education to the Ministry of Propaganda. The Department of State to the Ministry of Failed Diplomacy. The Department of Agriculture to the Ministry of Food Insecurity. The Department of Homeland Security to the Ministry of Racism. The Department of Transportation to the Ministry of Deportation. And the Department of Treasury to the Ministry of Tax Breaks for the Rich and Famous and Meme Coin. And now it's time to take another short musical break to listen to another original piece composed by E. Dudex and performed by Rusty Stubblefield and the Electric Glove Orchestra, entitled "Didn't Want to Do It." Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with another conflated conspiracy theory.
I didn't want to do it, but she talked me into it. I didn't want to do it, now I just can't ever quit.
Thank you, boys and girls. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Remember, the Electric Glove Orchestra's complete catalog is available online at Bearberry Path Music. Last week, as Epstein survivors gathered on the steps of the Capitol to tell their horrific stories about being lured into captivity by Ghislaine Maxwell to work as sex slaves for Jeffrey Epstein, President Donald Trump thrust the most high-profile of all Epstein sex slaves into the limelight. That's right, last week President Trump appointed his wife, First Lady Melania, as the nation's new AI czar. At a gathering of tech billionaires at the White House last Thursday, Trump said, quote, "Given the dismal failure Melania had with her Be Best initiative during my first term in office, I am giving her yet another opportunity to demonstrate that she is more than just a sex object by asking her to head up our country's AI task force." End quote. Trump's initiative, dubbed the Presidential AI Challenge, is aimed at integrating AI into the nation's schools as part of his overall plan for U.S. global dominance as an AI leader. At the White House gathering, which included tech billionaires Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, and Bill Gates, noticeably absent from the group was Elon Musk, Trump continued his remarks about Melania's appointment saying, quote, "Let me tell you a little story. When Jeffrey Epstein, introduced me to Melania at a party in 1988, Melania and I had our first sexual encounter that night. I liked her so much that I paid software engineers at Microsoft and Apple to develop a chip that could be implanted in a woman's brain capable of dismantling all of her cognitive functions. More importantly, I wanted the chip implantation to result in converting a woman into a loyal, submissive, compliant sex slave to me for the remainder of her natural life. After numerous trials and much beta testing, Microsoft and Apple completed that project in 2014, and the sex chip was successfully implanted in Melania's brain 1 year later during my first presidential run for office. Since then, I've had no regrets. Contrary to what I initially thought, having an artificially intelligent wife and sex slave is far better than having a wife with no intelligence at all. Melania is an amazing example of how robotics and cyber engineering can gratify man's most basic biological needs, and because of her firsthand experience, I can find no woman on the planet that, as far as I know, is better qualified than Melania to be America's first fembot and lead the nation's AI task force." End quote. Upon learning about Melania's sex chip implantation procedure, Vice President J.D. Vance said that he was going to look into the same procedure for his wife, Usha. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said, quote, "What the heck you waiting for, J.D.? My wife had that procedure done years ago along with all of the female anchors on Fox News. That's why we call it Fox Family and Friends." End quote. Unaware that Melania was held captive as Trump's sex slave, in a CBS News interview this past weekend, Attorney General Pam Bondi confessed that when she was a teenager, she too was held captive as a sex slave by Jeffrey Epstein. Bondi said, quote, "I was only 14 at the time, and Epstein promised to pay to send me to law school and to introduce me to Donald Trump in exchange for providing him with sex, which I did on numerous occasions. This is the reason why I can't release the full Epstein file. My name is in there, and so is Trump's. Releasing the files would ruin my entire career. I would no longer be able to serve as the nation's top cop and would have to go back to selling my body on the streets of Miami again. If that happens, my only hope would be to ask Mr. Trump for a pardon. Or maybe, if that doesn't work, I can lie under oath and get to share a prison cell with my mentor, Ghislaine Maxwell." End quote.
Well, we've reached our destination. We'll be back next week to pick you up for yet another journey to and from the Conflation Station.